So today we thought, what better day than today to introduce Annie. Annie, well, she's not really a little orphan Annie, but it's time for everybody to go out on pasture, and so we're dealing with loud sheep at the moment. Something that you will experience when you have sheep. When they want something, particularly Icelandics, they want it now. Back to Annie. So Annie is one of twin girls, and her mom, Lyla, is what we kind of refer to as the leader sheep of our Icelandic flock. We'll come back to that in a moment in this video, but I want to finish talking about Annie here. So Lyla had twin girls, and basically sort of we give her the excuse that she's made the survival instinct of a wild animal to only look after and feed the strongest of the two.
In her case was the first.
Which in Lila's case was her first baby girl, Snow. When Lyla was confined to a small space in the barn with Annie and Snow, she did look after them both. She did feed them both, but once they got out into the pasture, she selected the one that she kind of seemed to think was the strongest and deserved to survive, and left poor Annie to fend for herself. We kind of view it as maybe a natural instinct, because in the wild maybe she wouldn't have been able to have maintained two. Maybe that's just the way she is. But anyways, Annie has developed. She's become our bottle-fed lamb ewe, and her and Daisy get along great, our bottle-fed calf. The one thing that has always intrigued us about Annie, and we kind of feel this may come from the leader sheep factor with Lyla, is she is the smartest sheep we have ever had. She comes up to the door and gets her bottle. She can figure out her way to navigate from any pen or any part of the yard. She can get back to the other sheep. If we did that with some of our other ones, they would be completely lost. You just take them outside the pen and they can't figure out how to get back in the pen. So this is where we've often said leader sheep qualities come in. So we're going to talk a little bit about that.
So what exactly is a leader sheep? And this is kind of an interesting thing that's fairly specific to Icelandics. And there's some different information on it because kind of historically they were sheep that made up a smaller percentage of the Icelandic sheep flock in Iceland that had qualities that essentially, to put it pretty bluntly, they were smarter. They were better at sort of fending off predators, leading the herd to and from locations, able to sort of think ahead, which is typically not things that you would sort of associate with sheep. Now, what's kind of interesting about this is if you do some reading, basically all the sort of true leader sheep still only exist in Iceland. Now, with that in mind, Icelandic sheep haven't been exported everywhere around the world, and although some of the exports into Canada and the US were not, let's say it this way, not large numbers of sheep, my opinion is there's a chance that some sheep in the flock, or the herd, the North American herd, although not being selectively bred for it or sort of isolated from the main herd for those traits, definitely exhibit, or at least in my opinion, seem to exhibit some of the traits of the leader sheep. And we happen to have one of those. And I guess it's one of those things. They, when you do some reading online, the qualities that make them excellent for their ability to sort of navigate long distances, bring the herd along with them. They usually do exactly that, lead the herd. They can also work against you. Which makes it they're interesting for that reason. So this white ewe right here is Lyla. Well, that's how we pronounce her name, and she's genetically quite distinct from everything else we have in our flock. Pardon the board in front that kind of hides her. She's been interesting because she's the sheep that is constantly on the lookout as to what's going on around her. She's the sheep that tends to lead the herd, even though she is getting a little older. And her offspring often, although not always, seem to inherit the same traits. So here's a bit of an example. We are a little bit late this morning letting these girls out, and again, Lyla, the white one there, is longingly looking down the channel along with her younger one there, Moo Cow, and while the rest of them are really not too worried about going out to the pasture, these two are kind of like, the expectation is there of, hey, you need to open the door and let us out. Subtle, but she's over there where they get to go out to the pasture, versus these ones who are over here thinking I'm going to give them something.
There's 4 main points that basically kind of define a leader sheep. Basically, they have a very good sense of direction, which is something we do find with Lyla and her offspring. You can kind of get them out somewhere and they still seem to be able to find their way back, where others definitely cannot do that. They also tend to lead the herd. The herd waits till, that's point 2. The herd will wait until they guide them on where they're supposed to go. And if she doesn't go through the gate, most of them aren't going to go through the gate either. So that's something that's kind of important. You need your leader sheep to basically be willing to follow you, kind of, and trust you. They do have a great ability to sense when there's danger. They look after the herd. They tend to, if somebody's missing, they go looking for them. They round them up, that kind of thing. Great thing to have out in the pasture, that sort of thing. They're also usually quite loud, at least ours are, which definitely lets you know when something is going on. Now, I'm not sure how accurate this is or it isn't. They're supposed to have a very, very soft, warm fleece. And now, we definitely find that with Lyla. She is our best fleece animal, but we also have credited that to her being white, because white also tends to be the softest fleece. So whether that's actually a factor in Lyla and why we think she could be from leader sheep genetics, you know, that's kind of guessing. But she definitely has warm fleece. We definitely have the leadership qualities of knowing sense of direction and having the others follow her. Basically, they kind of, if Lyla does it, I'll do it. We do know that because if Lyla jumps the fence, they're all going to jump the fence. Yet if Lyla doesn't, nobody does. But those are the 4 main points that you'll come across if you do any research on the leader sheep.
We're not saying that she absolutely is a leader sheep. We're just saying that compared to every other sheep we have, except for her offspring, she has qualities that the rest don't. As Stephanie said, it's like Lila's the one that is always looking for a break in the fence, or when we use the electric netting, she watches all the lambs, and if a lamb touches it and it's not on, then she's out. She doesn't test it herself, but it's just kind of those sort of things, and she's definitely the leader. Now, most of her female offspring have been similar, not all of them though. We have 2 right now that I would say are definitely looking like prospects. One is Moo Cow, which I showed you earlier, who seems to have a lot of the same qualities, and actually Annie, the little bottle lamb, seems to have the same. Like
She's by far the smartest sheep we have ever had.
Yeah, she's super smart. She can navigate things that over distances that you wouldn't expect a bottle lamb to be able to figure out. Now, her other female offspring from this year, the white one, I would say, doorknob. Yeah, she does not have the qualities of a leader sheep. One thing that's kind of interesting out of Lyla, we've never had a male survive. She's done this picking, usually the first, but picking an offspring and kind of looking after it, and she's always kind of left the boys.
So one thing that we find very interesting with Lyla and the leader sheep qualities is her inability, it seems, to look after twins. We've never had Lyla, she's always had twins, but she's always left one. It's kind of all up in the air as to whether she's leaving the second one or whether she's selecting one. And that's where it's kind of interesting, because she's always had a male and a female, and she's always left the male. And it's a very interesting thing, because in leader sheep, actually only, don't quote me on this, I think it is around 7% of all leader sheep in the world are rams. The rest are ewes. And it almost seems like she is selecting which babies she wants to look after. Even with Annie and Snow, which are her 2 lambs from this year, if we hadn't gotten her into a stall where she basically was forced to look after her second baby, she would have selected Snow over Annie. And it's interesting because we think Annie is the one that actually is displaying the traits of a leader sheep more so than Snow is. So it's just food for thought. It's interesting when you start watching the dynamics of these sheep. I mean, they are smart animals. I should rephrase that. Some of them are very smart animals, and then others are just dumb. There's no way to sugarcoat it. And it's interesting when you start seeing the leaders develop and you see them, the others stand back and let them make the decision, yet those leader sheep are smart enough not to go to the risk themselves. As Chris was saying earlier, Lyla lets somebody else hit that electric fence first. She watches, and as soon as she knows it's on or off, that's when she makes her decision. It's a great quality, and then at the same time, not so great. I could definitely see out in the wilds where they could come in contact with predators and things like that. Having a leader sheep that can get her flock going, is a great quality. But here, sometimes it's a pain. But anyways, that's just a little bit of our insights. As we say, no way are we claiming that she is a leader sheep. Without doing genetic testing, there is no way to actually determine if her lineage does go back to some of these leader sheep from Iceland. But it's an interesting thing to look at, and the more you look at it, the more traits she seems to have that are similar. We find in our flock that each sheep has its own personality, and it's very interesting and enjoyable to watch those personalities develop and become what they become. With a little bit of research into some of the history, you could definitely see why the Icelandic are the way they are. And it is interesting to see that primitiveness of this breed come out in behaviors around the farm.